Hey guys, Adam Trigger here, wagertalk.com. The conference previews roll on, and we are heading to the ACC, to our nation's capital, with my good friend Aaron Kidd. You can find him on Twitter at AKSports90. But he's coming in, UVA fan, but also very sharp college basketball bettor and very tuned into ACC sports. So, AK, welcome in. Can't wait to talk about some ACC hoops with you.
Trey, thanks for having me on, man. I'm very excited to talk about the ACC and see if we can't find a winner.
So I got to ask you this: are you a fan? So this is all 15 teams show up in DC. I noticed some other conferences like BP and I'll talk about like the MAC later in this week, where I guess they're making the regular season a little bit more meaningful by only taking maybe like the top eight. Are you a fan of that, or do you like when everyone gets to show up and play for a title?
Absolutely, man. I'm a big fan of putting all the teams in the tournament. I think it makes for a fun, not only just weekend, but week. Makes yeah, I understand that, we want to make the regular season as important as possible. But I'm a fan of it, man. I'm very sad that I can't go this year. I actually, if you remember, I made it down to the ACC tournament last year in Greensboro. Watched my Virginia Cavaliers puke it away in the championship. But credit to Duke, man. And speaking about that, Duke's kind of owned the ACC tournament over the years, especially since 2010. So,
Yep. So they moved to Capital One Arena this year, Washington, D.C. Feels very neutral. I'm not really sure. Like you can kind of tell like when it's in North Carolina. I mean, man, like those North Carolina based teams definitely have the advantage from a fan perspective. I feel like this is going to be quite neutral. Like, do you have any insight to who's going to show up in DC? Well, do you think Virginia will have the biggest presence there?
I think Virginia will have a presence there. Virginia's fan base is traveled well in the Tony Bennett era, but that championship game last year felt like a Duke home game. It really did. And even so, on Friday night, I was there when Duke, I guess, beat Miami, and just felt like a Duke. It felt like we were in Cameron Indoor. So I definitely think it'll make it a little bit more neutral. I definitely think Virginia will bring some fans there, and what better way to come off the big senior night win over Georgia Tech than give some fans a little encouragement to come.
Well, that's where we'll start. That's where the tournament starts. It's the 12 versus the 13. Notre Dame's the 12. Georgia Tech is the 13. AK, I got to be honest, kind of surprised. Like, we'll tip the cap to Shrewsbury there and Notre Dame for being the 12 seed. There was a point in time where Notre Dame lost by 20 to the Citadel, and they scraped by Marist, right? Like, you go back to like late December, and that was what this Notre Dame team was doing. So to kind of see them not finish in the basement of the ACC and even finish above Louisville, Miami, and Georgia Tech is pretty impressive. You know, Georgia Tech, on the other hand, you kind of mentioned it, UVA, got it done on senior night there at home. But Georgia Tech had won three straight going into that game, starting to play a little bit better. Interestingly enough, Georgia Tech lost both of the regular season meetings. So the age-old question, can you beat a team three times? Notre Dame hopes that you can. Georgia Tech hopes to buck that trend. This one feels, man, I think we have a number out now. I'm looking at the lines here. It looks like we're this open, maybe pick, Notre Dame -1 most places. Think the odds makers kind of got that right. This feels like a very much a toss-up type game here. Are you leaning one way or the other, Notre Dame, Georgia Tech?
Yeah, Trig. I actually have a very heavy lean to Notre Dame, believe it or not. The age-old question: Can you do it three times in a season? And I'll get to that later on something else I want to touch on. But it felt like Georgia Tech kind of went on that run, as you mentioned. They won three games in a row, had a big win last week against Wake, and then it just kind of feels like they kind of packed it in when UVA kind of came out and punched them in the mouth in the first half. So I haven't played this game yet, but I do lean Notre Dame here.
Yeah, it's something that we'll kind of talk about as we talk through the tournament. I think, I'm looking for teams that have a high offensive efficiency to potentially like advance multiple rounds and win multiple tournament games when we're talking about like overall future type betting. But for Notre Dame on a one-off scenario, their offense is the worst in the ACC by a pretty wide margin. They're 252nd offensive efficiency per KenPom. It's far and away the worst, but that defensive rating, 27th. That's really good. They are basically the third it looks like the third highest defensive rating in the conference. So, in a one-off type game against a Georgia Tech team that, I mean, they did improve down the stretch, but were also, not great for a large portion of the season. That definitely could play. It will be an interesting matchup. I just don't really have much. I don't really have high hopes, I guess, is what I would say for either of those teams sort of like making a run. I don't think, really anyone on this first day, if anyone's going to be on this first day is going to make a run, I don't think it's going to be one of those two teams. I guess that's just my general thought there. And we'll get more of that into that when we get to Wednesday. The next game, NC State Louisville. This is a game, man. Like, you and I saw NC State play a couple of times in person, and I think our takeaway was similar. Where, like, I know for me, and you had been to a bunch of games as well. Some of them together, some of them by yourself. NC State's got to be as disappointing of a team that I saw in person this year. From like what I watched relative to like where they are in the standings, what sort of some of the records and the metrics say they are. Do you think 9.5 is way too many for them to lay on a neutral to Louisville?
Well, kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier. Does a team pack it in? Does Louisville pack it in? And listen, when NC State can run the offense through DJ Burns and Horn on the outside hitting shots, they can compete. And we've talked about that, but they just seem like they just go through these spurts where they just can't put it together. Whether Burns gets in foul trouble, like the game that we went to against Virginia Tech, they just kind of seem discombobulated. So it's hard to get behind Louisville, but it would definitely be Louisville plus the points. I think I've seen 9.5, 10 already, or definitely can't lay it with NC State here. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, so overall, the shot selection has been better. Like, I know there was a point in time, probably about a month ago, where they were outside the top 200 in field goal percentage. So it has slightly improved, even though they're only 2-7, down the stretch. So it really hasn't translated to more wins than losses. But I do think they are taking better shots. That being said, conference only offense, field goal percentage offense, in the ACC, they're 13th. The only teams they're ahead of is Notre Dame and Louisville, and they're not ahead of Louisville by much. 2-point percentage is 13th. They're right down at the bottom of the conference there in that metric. Louisville doesn't shoot the three at all. Like, they're the worst 3-point shooting team, in the ACC. We're very close to the bottom. But I guess my concern here is you kind of nailed it with, is Louisville going to show up? If Louisville cares about this game or cares about being at this tournament, which I sort of lean toward them caring, like, there's no reason for me to think they wouldn't want to come and play and give an effort. Then the 9.5 seems like too many. These two teams played back in January. It was 89-83. I would argue that Louisville has made pretty significant improvement since that game. You talk about, their losing streak entering this tournament, but, off of that game, they had put together a couple decent efforts. They hung around with Clemson. They knocked off Florida State. They came up here to the Carrier Dome and had a game that they lost pretty much on the last shot, 94-92 to Syracuse. And then they blew out Georgia Tech. So they did show improvement right there. Feels to me like this is a better Louisville team than maybe NC State saw the first time, but you kind of nailed it. If it's NC State's really all about putting it together. If they do, they'll probably win, but I could see them struggling to win by margin there. All right, the final game on Tuesday, and I think you have an opinion here, so I'm going to really let you take the lead on this one. We've got Boston College, Miami, and again, it pops up. BC won both the regular season meetings with their ability to really go inside and play through the post, play through Quentin post and the interior in the paint. But Miami maybe coming around. Maybe this is new life for them. They finished 14th in the ACC. They were expected to do much better than that this year, coming off, of course, a Final Four appearance. So, AK, talk to me. BC, Miami, what are you seeing here?
Yeah, so Miami. I know Nigel Pack's down; he's done for the year. But when you look at Jim Larinaga, he's already said he's coming back next year. It's another guy, a coach that's been there, done that. He's done well in this tournament. He does well in tournaments. Look at what he did with that team last year. No one expected them to go as far as he did in the NCAA tournament. And they're getting healthy again. They've been banged up all year. You still talk about a team that's 91st in offensive efficiency, 113th in defensive efficiency. But if they can find a way to slow Quentin Post down and kind of keep him corralled down low, I think Miami finds a way to win this game. And I just think that it is preposterous that Miami is still 150 to 1 to win the ACC tournament. Um, so if you're looking for a dark horse, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, Miami, like I said, I really think they were beaten up on the inside. That's probably, I mean, that's where you're going to beat Miami. I said it since the beginning of the season. I got a chance to see Miami play a couple of games down in the Bahamas, and I really felt like they lacked two things from last year. One, the shot making ability that Isaiah Wong brought to the table was much better than the shot makers on this team. And now, of course, you already talked about Pack being out. But the other thing that I really felt like they just had not a ton of size inside. Like Norchad Omir is a little bit undersized for his position. So if they run into a team with like big time size in this tournament or like physicality, like in North Carolina, who is on the other side of the bracket. So that's another thing. They're not going to run into that, until potentially the final. Against these teams where you can, they'll let you, live on the perimeter a little bit and shoot the ball. I do think you're right. Like they definitely have it. They definitely have a chance. And if they can get some momentum from a win over BC, like get that first one, I could totally see them being a tough out for a team like Clemson, a team like Virginia, who is going to play a lower scoring game, or a team like Duke that, be honest, I feel like they've been soft inside. I've got a chance to see them a couple times, one of them with you, and they lack some of that toughness on the inside. So you might be right here in terms of like wanting to take a flyer on Miami. The side of the bracket they're on, it seems to be teams that they could potentially handle. The worst matchups for them seem to be on the other side.
Yeah, and they have depth. Say what you want to about Miami, but Poplar's going to be back. Joseph's been giving them quality minutes. I think they have some depth that there's a manageable path to get there. So, and when you have a number like that, if you're smart, unlike me, there's ways to hedge things. Unfortunately, I haven't done that in my last few futures.
Yeah, and for the viewers that don't know, AK has been on some kind of run where his teams, he gets a great price, they get to the final, and they lose in the final. I think you know what, AK. If you got to the final with a 150 to 1 Miami ticket, I think you would probably find you probably have already find a way to secure some profit there. I gotta think that you'd have something going to secure some profit there. But
Penn
yeah,
State not
I
getting
mean,
off a
again,
shot last year still haunts me, True.
oh yeah, a lot of these go back to last year when we were on them together, and yep, the Penn State one in the Big Ten final certainly that one will sting for a while. But anyway, we'll go back to the top of the bracket. This is Wednesday now. We know one of the matchups we're going to get on Wednesday is Virginia Tech, Florida State, 8-9 game. The thing I've seen, you and I went to two Virginia Tech games together this year, and sort of my biggest takeaway is this team really struggles to defend the rim. Now, that's something that, like, offensively, they're very good. 32nd in offensive efficiency. They're a team that can, they make shots. They're number one conference only offense. KenPom, 55.1%, I believe is their expected field goal percentage. 2-point percentage is very high for them. Like they definitely have a solid offense that I would say took a step forward when Couture came back. But man, this team really will just let you get to the rim. They are near the bottom of the ACC in a lot of the advanced defensive metrics. 2-point percentage against 12th. That's not very good. Do you think that comes into play here? Does Florida State take advantage of that and get by Virginia Tech in this round?
Yeah, Trick. I mean, Virginia Tech's one of the hardest teams to figure out. They struggle on the road. Then they're not too far away from DC and Virginia Tech fans, as we all know in football, but also in basketball, it really developed a big fan base. So I expect there to be some Virginia Tech Hokies there. And when Padula and Couture are on, I know Padula, can hit shots, but I think Couture is kind of the backbone of that team. And here's the thing about, I know you mentioned they struggled inside. I mean, we watched Duke, right, with Mitchell and Flipkowski, and I kind of think they're soft inside. They kind of went to town on Virginia Tech when we were there at the Castle. But I think if Lynn Kidd can find a way and Couture and Padula can hit shots. It's a very dangerous team. They're a very good offense, but they just struggled away from home. So very curious to see how they do, but wouldn't be surprised if they pull off the win over Florida State here.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of this Florida State team. I would probably be looking for a way to play against them. I guess for me, like, Florida State, their struggles seem to be shooting the ball this year. They're not a great rebounding team either, but like, that's an area that, Virginia Tech also struggles in. They're, near the bottom in offensive rebounding rate in the ACC. So I guess my concern here for Virginia Tech is that a lot of the things that like Florida State doesn't do well, they won't be able to exploit, right? Like I don't think they'll be able to turn Florida State into a 3-point shooting team. They're not going to be able to fully take advantage of having a rebounding edge. So it's a tricky matchup, or it's a tricky kind of scenario, because like you said, if Florida State was given another crack at North Carolina, they might have the better chance to like make some noise. But I guess we'll stay on that game. So the winner of this game will play the 1 seed North Carolina. I think you have a pretty strong lean to North Carolina winning this tournament. It would be pretty surprising to me, unless UNC just does not care if they lose to either Virginia Tech or Florida State. And for the reasons I mentioned, I think UNC has way too much physicality inside for Virginia Tech to do anything about it. Talk to me about that matchup, and if you see North Carolina even getting challenged on this side of the bracket.
Yeah, and just to finish up on Virginia Tech and Florida State, I know Florida State beat them in the last game, but Virginia Tech actually out-rebounded them. Virginia Tech just kind of struggled from the foul line, missing foul shots in that game, and kind of blew that game. They were handing it to them in the first half. So, always the revenge factor as well. But as far as North Carolina, man, I mean, I think we're starting to really see not only the best team in the ACC, but maybe one of the best teams in the country, right? With Baycock, he has punished Duke both games. You got a prolific scorer in R.J. Davis, and when we talk about the national champions of late, it's teams that were both top 20 in offensive and defensive efficiency. They're fifth in Ken Pom in adjusted defensive efficiency, and they're just outside the top 20 at 26th. They can attack you from different ways. They've got depth, and I really would be surprised here if North Carolina didn't care, and solely based on the fact of their arch rival Duke has owned the ACC tournament at least the last 15 years. And what better way to put kind of a cap on your season and go into the NCAA tournament if you face Duke in that final round, saying you beat Duke not once, not twice, but 3 times.
Yeah, I don't buy into this, like the teams don't care about this. I do think there's an element of like, if they get caught sleeping in that first game, it's possible they get an early exit and get knocked out. But like it seems to me like, the quarterfinal round is where you can catch these teams sleeping. By the time you get to semifinal Friday, and then of course championship Saturday, these teams are locked in. Everyone cares. Everyone wants to cut down the nets and win a title. So really the only concern is, for like a team like North Carolina or like a Duke, would be getting nipped on that quarterfinal day, their first game, when they're going to be playing a team that came off of a win and maybe has some momentum. The other side of the team that they would play is the team one of the teams I'm most interested in, and that's the Pitt Panthers. Have had a chance to see them play in person. There's a lot to like, in my opinion, about this Pitt team. Specifically, like they've got the physicality, in my opinion, to potentially give North Carolina a hard time. And they're defensively strong enough, rebounding. They get after it, on the glass and rebounding, and they can hang in there on defense. So that would be like, they've won 4 of their last 5. They're actually on a really nice run, pretty much since the calendar flipped to February. I believe they're like 10-2 in their last 12 games. So certainly playing good ball. And the reason I bring up the Pitt North Carolina matchup potentially is because those two teams played way early in the season. That was early January. The game was at Pitt, and UNC kind of went in there as a pretty short favorite. If I remember, Pitt was like a quote unquote play for a lot of people. And, UNC kind of just bullied them. Pitt couldn't really score, and UNC won that game. But for Pitt to get here, they're going to have to face the winner of either Wake Forest. It would be Wake Forest, Notre Dame, Georgia Tech. Let's assume it's Wake Forest for argument's sake. Very interesting matchup. They split the regular season series. Who do you think ends up potentially playing UNC in that semifinal round?
Well, you kind of got two different contrasts of basketball. Pitt's kind of physical. I know, we're here to talk about gambling and not just talk about who wins the game. Pitt's been great against the number. You kind of mentioned that a little bit earlier. Pitt, Notre Dame, and North Carolina, best three teams in conference play against the number. So curious to see what that line opens at. But I would like Pitt to advance there.
Yeah, especially the way that Wake Forest kind of comes into this tournament. I mean, they will have the chance to pick up a win and pick up some momentum. I guess that's something Pitt doesn't have. Of course, they get the bye, but that could also very well mean an early exit for Wake Forest, just the kind of way things have been going right now. So I'm with you though. I thought Pitt made a great adjustment on Wake Forest in the first meeting. I was unfortunately on the wrong side of that game, where they just basically sort of started to they took it to Wake in the second half of that game, and it just opened, like, their physicality opened everything up. They overturned a 10-point lead, and ended up getting the job done. And of course, I think Wake Forest ended up winning the other one. But I'm kind of with you. I do like where Pitt is right now. I think they probably get through Wake, and I think they could give UNC a game. That to me is going to be that would be like a pretty big test for North Carolina. I think they may be a good play in that game against the number. All right, let's pop over to the other side of the bracket. I've got the Q's hoodie on. They're the 7th seed. They're going to get the winner of NC State, Louisville. And we'll call it NC State because they're almost a 10-point favorite. They're probably going to win that opening round matchup against Louisville. Got to be honest, I kind of terrified of Q's having to play and beat NC State for a third time. As much as I kind of trashed NC State when we talked about the matchup with Louisville and how I think that, they take bad shots. And it really has been a good matchup for Syracuse across the two meetings. Syracuse blew out NC State when they came up here to Syracuse. The second meeting in NC State, Cuse was an underdog, and they were up like 20-something. They led a lot of the way. They actually took a pretty big counterpunch from NC State in the second half of that game, came back to win the game. But, man, Cuse, they still, Autry, in my opinion, still not a great coach. I think he gets out game planned on like a regular basis. I thought the schedule sort of opened up for them toward the end of the season. I don't know, AK. I don't know if they can beat NC State 3 times. As much as I don't like NC State, I don't know if Cuse can beat them 3 times, especially with the way NC State started to make adjustments in the second half of that game in Raleigh. What do you see there, Syracuse, NC State?
I mean, just some general thoughts, Trick. Doesn't Judah Mintz feel like the type of guy that can have a march, right? And I know we don't bet narratives or anything, but the kid scored over 20 points 9 times in conference play. He's electric. But I think Syracuse's kind of turn, if you will, is they don't turn the ball over like they were. If they can play mistake-free basketball, they are a completely different team. Early on in the season, it just felt like they were careless with the ball, felt like they weren't in sync. Maybe the offense wasn't fluid, and it felt like they, maybe figured it out some. So if they could play play a little not turnover basketball, they don't turn the ball over. I think they got a shot, man. But can a team beat a team 3? I try not to buy into the can a team beat a team 3 times in a row. I know it's tough to do it in a season, but I try not to get too wrapped up in that.
No, I agree. I try to buck that narrative a lot of times as well. And this is the type of thing where you have to take the matchups for what they are and then try to separate that from you're trying to bet a full tournament future. I think Syracuse is worth a shot at their odds. Reason being, if they do get through NC State, or who knows, maybe Louisville pulls the upset and they get Louisville, which would be an easier game. I think Cuse has a chance against Duke for a lot of the reasons you said. Benny Williams got kicked off this team. I think it was a net positive. I think it was addition by subtraction. The guy has been a cancer in the clubhouse pretty much his entire time at Syracuse. Syracuse slimmed their rotation down, only playing 6 guys. Now that could take its toll maybe by the final, but I think it's been a positive for them since they sort of went to a 6-man rotation. Judah Mintz is from Washington, D.C. He's going to be fired up to play in the D.C. area. Probably also be getting recruited by Ed Cooley at the same time because there's been some rumors of that. I hope that's not a distraction. But, Syracuse, like they're the team to me that I think from the bottom seeds. I mean, you talked about Miami, and that's a big time flyer. That's like a 150 to 1. That's a total
Right.
like just throw a dart right there with them and see if you can catch lightning in a bottle. But if Cuse can get by this first round matchup, which they will be favored in, they will be favored against, most likely favored, maybe close to a pick against NC State. They'll definitely be favored against Louisville. Remember the Duke Syracuse game, AK, was a very good game for like 30 minutes. Duke closed that game on a big run, but that was at Cameron Indoor, where that can happen. On a neutral floor, I think Cuse has a chance there. And Syracuse, let's kind of continue on. Clemson, they almost beat Clemson here at the Dome. I think they have a chance against Clemson in the third time playing them. And then the winner of the Clemson potentially BC Miami game would get Virginia, another team that hasn't seen Cuse since December. This is obviously a different Cuse team. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Talk to me about the Virginia Cavaliers. That's your team, what their outlook is, and if you see them getting slipped up in that 3-6 game, or if they're going to make it to championship Saturday.
I hate to say it, Trig, but I certainly could. Virginia's offense finally looked the best it's looked in over a month on Saturday night. It felt like there was some energy behind the team. Out of the same mouth, I'll say I think Tony Bennett is best when he has no expectations. No one's expecting Virginia to come in and do anything with this ACC tournament. Look at their odds. I couldn't believe them. Almost 10 to, I think I saw 19 to 1. It was ridiculous. And I think people have given up on this Virginia team. Reese Beekman, back to back Defensive Player of the Year in the ACC. He's going to come out. He wants to have a good, run at it again. Being all the things he's been through. This is a lot of the same team, or some of the same team that lost an ACC championship last year when no one thought they could really get there. I think they were 4 to 1 or 5 to 1. You had them last year. So I wouldn't just throw in the towel on Virginia, but on the flip side, I wouldn't be surprised if they get slipped up here.
Yeah, the way this is shaping up, like, and this is kind of how I felt about the ACC all year. All things considered, like, it is a pretty mediocre year, I think, for the ACC in general. I mean, North Carolina
It's
is a
very
really good
top
team,
heavy
of course.
trade. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, you can really tell. I mean, Pitt is your 4 seed, right? Like, this is a team that I went and saw Pitt get absolutely blown out of their own building by Duke. At the beginning of the year, I think a lot of some people may have had them toward the bottom half of the ACC in terms of like where expected finish, and they've sort of emerged as the 4. Wake Forest, the 5. Like, there's a lot of teams that just never really panned out in this conference. Virginia Tech, NC State falling down to 10. Miami may be the biggest, most glaring in terms of finishing 14th in this league. Clemson started the season with such a hot non-conference, and they only finished 6th. So in conclusion here, AK, I guess this is the question. I know you like North Carolina. Is North Carolina the one? Is this one of the conference tournaments where we're going to see the class of the league, sort of the cream rise to the top, if you will, and they're just going to get it done and win this tournament? Is there? I'm not seeing a ton of value like 2 through 5 or 6. I think you go UNC or take one of these kind of big time long shots. How are you kind of approaching it?
Well, absolutely, Trig. And something else too about this tournament. It is a long tournament, as you mentioned earlier. You got all these teams in the tournament. North Carolina being the 1 seed. What do they get? They get the early games, and I swear that matters. I know there's a chance, like you said, to come out and fall asleep at the wheel, a snoozy, noon tip. But on the flip side, look what happened to UNC Asheville in the Big South tournament. They had to play back-to-back late games, come back and have to play a noon tip the next day, and they're exhausted. They have no legs under them. So I think the fact that North Carolina gets the early games as well, they get through those. I think they close it out Saturday in Washington, D.C. Pretty good. I mean, I got it when it opened at like plus 160, plus 170. I think it's like plus 150. I took some more there. So I love North Carolina to win the ACC tournament, and wouldn't mind if you take a flyer still on them at 15 or 18 to 1, somewhere around there to win the NCAA tournament, Trey.
Yeah, they certainly have seemed to come to sort of round into form since coming up to Syracuse, losing a game that was probably meant a lot more for Cuse than it did for UNC at the time. They've certainly seemed to round in the form. They will be the team to beat. I've said this on like every show I've done. I'm not a Duke guy this year. I think there's something lacking with that team. I think the interior is soft. I think they're a little bit mentally soft. I've seen them play 3 times in person now. I feel like it shows in their play, like right there. I think that's a team, Duke, that when they get punched in the mouth at some point, they're out. Whether it's this tournament, the NCAA tournament, I'd be willing to sort of fade them in both of them as far as a winner. And so, I can't argue with you like in North Carolina. I think if Syracuse, they certainly kind of feel like a team that could get hot and win a couple of games. I don't know if they win this thing, but certainly win a game or two or be out in the first round. I mean, if that's just Syracuse in a nutshell. And I can't argue with a sprinkle on 150-1 on a Miami team, that many had in their like top 25 at the beginning of the year. So that was the ACC. Big thank you to my buddy AK for joining me and breaking down this tournament. You can find him on Twitter at AKSports90. He's also like red hot in college hoop right now. So, he posts his picks there for free. And we'll keep, bringing you these bringing you these tournament previews. Please like and subscribe to the Wager Talk YouTube channel. And I hope everyone has a fantastic championship week. Cash his tickets. Also, give me a follow on Twitter at TopFlightSI, and we'll be sending out more free plays there as well. See you next time.